Okay. And with that, I'd like to introduce Erin. And again, thank you for joining us.
You know, let's see. Something's going funky with my computer. It's just not letting me accept. Oh, hold on. Let me check something. I tried to get all high tech and use my Keynote remote so that I could have like a laser pointer on the screen. And it worked earlier, but it appears to not be letting me use my touchpad now. So hold on, I can't accept. Stop! Make it go away. I have to make it go away so that I can accept the show my screen option. What is going on? Okay. All right. Let's see if that, maybe I won't be able to use my handy little laser pointer after all. All right. We will not experiment with new technology. We'll just get started. Like Sheila said, my name is Erin Sheldon. At this point, if you've watched many of these webinars, you've heard from me before. And today we're just following up on 2 other webinars about literacy instruction in the inclusive classroom, today with a focus on supporting communications. And supporting communication for students with Angelman is obviously just a massive undertaking, because the primary characteristic of Angelman syndrome is a profound expressive communication disability. It is more severe than the students' other disabilities. So we see their expressive communication being more impacted than their overall development, than their cognition, or than their receptive understanding. Just meaning that trying to support them to develop strong expressive communication skills just has to be our highest priority as we're planning their educational programs. Our kids with Angelman have, there's so many ways in which their expressive communication is affected, all these physical access barriers that they have to communication. One of the most important things to know is just that Angelman is actually one of the models of dyspraxia. It was described in the early 80s as being a motor planning disorder with particularly severe oral motor impacts. This means that our kids are very affected when it comes to organizing their bodies to plan how they're going to respond to a conversation, to a question, to whatever they're going to respond to initiating that motor response, and then to actually executing it. In addition, they have delays in their fine motor and their gross motor. Most of our kids have some form of vision issues such as astigmatism or strabismus or nearsightedness, and many of our kids have a lot of issues with their visual processing such as cortical visual impairment. And many of our kids have disruptions in their auditory processing. So, you'll find, I would say the majority of our kids with Angelman clearly have really strong receptive understanding, but there's sort of a subset of our kids who many people will describe as not appearing to understand what is being said around them, certainly not what you would expect them to appear to understand for their age. And those kids tend to be our ones with auditory processing disorders. So it's sort of like the sounds of language, the sounds of all of our spoken language is getting tangled up in their own brains. Their brains just have real difficulty processing it. My daughter Maggie has been described as autistic, and I think it's largely how she processes her visual information. She has low vision as well as cortical visual impairment, and she has a very significant auditory processing disorder. At 18 months, she was 18 months old the first time she turned her head in response to a sound. So it was only when she had sedated brainstem testing that we could even confirm she could hear, because she just didn't respond to sound. And I see this in a number of our kids where it feels to me with Maggie that when we're talking around her, it's almost like the sounds of spoken language are getting woven together or tangled up with all of the other sounds in her environment, and it's very difficult for her to kind of unwind the different strands of sound and be able to just focus on spoken language. So when you take all of these things together, you can see that there's a really significant challenge to supporting communication in our kids. But what we really need to always keep in mind is that because the communication disability in Angelman is more severe than any of the other disabilities, and they have so many kind of complex ways in which their neurology is affected by their Angelman, that whatever our students can express is the floor. It's not the ceiling of their comprehension. So they can only demonstrate to us the most minimal level of their own understanding. So when we see them demonstrating something, we really need to believe it because there's just so many ways, so many barriers to them being able to show us what they know. And the only way they're ever going to be able to really show us what they know is if we can support their communication. So this webinar, we're looking at how do we develop communication skills in our students with Angelman in the inclusive classroom. And honestly, most of this information I think will apply to any kind of classroom context, but I've just been getting lots of questions lately about better supporting our kids in inclusive contexts. I'm sure many of you have seen this slide before, but it just talks about how it really demonstrates visually how when we're working on supporting our kids' expressive communication so that they can share more of what they know with us, it's completely intertwined with all the other aspects of how language develops. So our kids are learning how to express themselves at the same time that they're learning to listen to and comprehend the spoken language around them. You'll see that you'll see a strong focus on literacy in this webinar, the ability to interpret symbols, to interpret symbolic message from other people, whether it's spoken language or a visual symbol, is really the cognitive process of reading. And the ability to take one's own ideas and put them into some kind of symbolic form so others can understand you is really the cognitive process of writing. So when we're working on our children's communication, we're very much working on kind of all the aspects of language development. This is a slide from Gail Porter and Linda Burkhart where they just do such a great job showing us one of the biggest barriers that our kids face. So they are surrounded by people speaking to them. We are using oral language in their classrooms, at home, in everything we do. And in a typically developing child, we speak to them. After about a year of hearing spoken language all around them, they start to express spoken language back. Just a few months old, they'll even start to babble in a way that's unique to the language that they're actually surrounded by. By the time they're 2 or 3 years old, they're putting multiple words together in the language that they're surrounded by. So typically developing children develop language by being surrounded by models of language that they can hear, that they can learn to make sense of, that they can learn to comprehend, that they can learn to imitate and babble with, and then that they can eventually start expressing. Our kids who don't speak are surrounded by all these models of spoken language, but it's really like they need a ramp. We can speak to them all we want, but if they can't produce spoken language, then they don't have a way to take in all of that spoken language and translate it into their own expressive language. And so what we have to do is provide something called aided language stimulation or aided language input, where we have to communicate with our kids with Angelman in the same way, using the same tools that they can access. And just like we start speaking to newborn babies before they're even born, we start speaking to babies in a language we believe they're going to be able to access, throughout a child's whole infancy and toddlerhood. We are speaking to them using words we know are beyond their own vocabulary at the time. We're speaking to kids in complete sentences. We're using all kinds of words knowing this might be the first time they're hearing it, but we're constantly speaking to kids and providing them a model that they can imitate, and we have to do the same thing with our kids with Angelman, but we have to do it in a way that they can actually benefit from that input. We know that spoken language is simply inaccessible to students with Angelman. The vast majority of our children cannot cannot produce oral language, and therefore all of these models of us talking around them are just not something that can develop into their own expressive language. And so therefore we see that in our kids. We see them with very limited abilities to express their own original ideas if they haven't been provided with a model that they can observe, they can experiment with, and then they can babble with and begin actually start talking to us. Hold on, I have to move this out of my way. Sheila, do you know if there's a way to get this go-to control panel thing off my screen? It's never covered up my slides as much as it has before.
You should be able to press the minimize button at the top. I
might have to do this. Okay, let's try that. Oh, that's perfect. So what we know is that children who cannot speak, I mean, our kids with Angelman are hardly unique. Children who cannot speak are rarely surrounded by a model of communication that they can observe, comprehend, imitate. So, you know, you might think of a child who's deaf, growing up in a deaf family, will be surrounded by that model of communication. And that's exactly what we have to figure out for our kids with Angelman. And fortunately, we can do that in the inclusive classroom. A number of families, of teachers have asked, do we really have to try to use some kind of communication system and augmentative alternative communication systems such as, you know, the iPads that people are buying, such as a Dynabox, that sort of thing. You know, we'll often hear, oh, but I can understand everything she says. She's just so expressive. She shows us so many things with her body. But we know that in the absence of learning a formal signed language, using your body to communicate will never be able to be enough to express abstract thoughts. So to be able to, you know, our kids can be so fluent with gestures, with their bodies, with facial expressions, telling us all kinds of things about the concrete things that surround them, what they want, what they like. That's often quite transparent. But if they're trying to communicate with us about anything abstract, something that happened in the past, something that happened in the future, a emotion that they're feeling, if something bad happened, they have to have a symbolic form of communication to be able to tell us those kinds of messages, because in the absence of a formal signed language, their own invented manual signs aren't going to be enough. So we use AAC so that our kids can observe us using visual symbols in natural motivating activities, so they can see visual symbols being combined and recombined to generate messages. I'm going to show you some examples of what that looks like in just a minute. In the inclusive classroom, we're asking both the adults and the peers to model the use of these AAC systems. The best, people will often ask kind of what's the best AAC system for our kids, or what's the best AAC app, best communication app on the iPad. And the best one is the one that people use, whichever one that is. The best one is the one that is accessible to our student, so that we can provide a model that the student can observe, and so that the student can start exploring and start babbling with and be able to one day communicate with. But the fundamental thing we're trying to do is teach our students with Angelman that there are two ways to express any message. We can speak it, which is most of what they're surrounded by, but we also have this second way. We have this communication system way to help express their ideas. When we're providing aided language input, we are taking visual symbols, we are highlighting them as we interact with the child. So what we're just doing is, it's called supporting the child to do what's called just mapping the verbal sound of a word to some kind of concrete visual symbol, so that they can sort of pair the two together and be able to express those same thoughts. So for example, you know, the word run is just a completely abstract, invented sound that means something that we've all agreed together means, you know, to move quickly on 2 feet. That's just a sound we all came up with. It just is what it is. We've just used it often enough that we've all together decided what that means. For our kids to be able to access that spoken sound of run, we have to provide them with some kind of concrete visual symbol, because they can't produce the sound. every student is ready for aided language input, just as every baby from the moment they are born is ready to be spoken to. Every single student with Angelman is ready for aided language input. If the student already has really strong receptive understanding, that's awesome, because by providing aided language input, we will basically be providing them a ramp so that they can access the language that's being spoken around them, so that they can start participating in the language that's being spoken around them. Many of our kids with Angelman, I really notice this in girls, especially as they kind of reach the double-digit age. Many of our girls in particular just seem willing to be silent rather than to be really different and use a communication system. I've seen so many of our girls just kind of smiling and nodding and trying to get along rather than resort to using a communication system. There's just often this reluctance. And if you look at, you know, girls, say, of the tween age or the teenage, you know, very few of those girls really want to stand out and do something totally unusual. So even for our students who have really strong receptive understanding, when we use their communication system to communicate with them, even though they already understand all the words we're saying, but when we're indicating their visual symbols, we're also making their communication system socially acceptable and socially normal, so that they stand out less when they use it. Then we have another group of students who are struggling to comprehend spoken language, so they're not even accessing comprehension of what we're saying. So they really need two ramps. They need that ramp to be able to express the spoken language, but they also need a ramp to be able to make sense of it. You know, the kids for whom the sounds of language are really getting tangled together in their minds. And so for those kids, we are modeling using AAC so that we can really build on their visual skills. We know that kids with Angelman have relative strengths in things like their visual memory. So when we speak to them while pointing to visual symbols, we're helping them map and sort of anchor the sounds of language to something visual, and therefore improving their comprehension. And as soon as you try using a communication system to talk to one of our kids, you'll immediately notice that you slow down. We simply can't talk as quickly as I'm talking right now when we have to select visual symbols to construct a message. And so if a student is struggling to comprehend language, the best thing we can do is talk to them with a communication system. We will slow down. We will therefore be a more appropriate communication partner. We will have to reduce the vocabulary that we use. We'll have to be much more strategic to be able to express our own messages using the much more limited symbol set that we'll have available to us. And therefore, we'll be supporting comprehension. So if there's a student, if you have a student where the idea is they are not ready yet for a communication system, this is precisely why they are. And I would argue that the more concerned we are that a student is not yet ready for a communication system is therefore the larger, we have even a higher priority to get a communication system in front of them so that we can start modeling a system. And I'll give you some visuals of what these systems tend to look like. But what all of them have in common, whatever communication system we use with our kids, we're just trying to problem solve that access to language. They can't produce the oral sounds of language, so we're going to find a system they can access that allows them to explore and develop language the way their typical peers do. So here's a very, very simple, like one of the earliest users in Proloquotago. It's just a, what is that, a 16 symbol per page or a 4x4, what's called core vocabulary. I can use this system to start modeling to a child, what do you want? Oh, I do not want that, right? I tried to set up my phone to let me use a laser pointer, and it seemed to interfere with my laptops. Unfortunately, I can't do that. You have to just look at the symbols and imagine I'm saying them. I want to go. I want to do it. I do not want to do it, right? Do you? You do it. You, let's go. You want that. So do you see how we have these core words in front of us, these are called core words. They're those really high frequency words. This is a very simple display. And even with relatively few symbols, there's actually quite a few things we can start modeling to the child. And you'll see in a vocabulary this size, it is obviously very limited, but these are really high frequency words. So we can use words like want and do and go when it's time to go get ready for bed, when it's time to get up because we have to go to school, when it's time to go home from school, when it's time to plan what we're going to eat. What do you want to eat? Are you all done or do you want more? We can use these words, even just this many symbols. We can model the use of them dozens of times across the day because they're such high frequency words. As soon as we start increasing the number of symbols on the page, look at how much more we can say. So this, I believe, is just the standard 5x5 vocabulary in Proloquo. Proloquo is just the most common app being used by our kids. It's also of all the apps that when I surveyed families about which app their child was actually using, it was just very highly ranked as one the kids were actually using. However, when I talk to families, kids are usually using the Proloquo to ask for things, which reflects the fact that we tend to set up these systems so that they can say, I want to eat, I want to eat noodles, I want to eat cheese. What we need to start doing if we're going to get them to start using more verbs than want is to start modeling those verbs. A lot of our kids find words like go and stop just really highly motivating. Maggie, my daughter Maggie, the first word she started using on a communication system was stop. She found it very powerful to be able to tell adults to stop doing just about everything we were doing. We can start modeling things like. So when we see their face light up when they see a favorite person, we say, oh, you like her. And we might only be modeling that one word. We might just think, today I'm just going to look for 10 opportunities to use the word like. We might say, today it's going to be a rough day. I'm going to look for one opportunity to use the word like, or I'm just going to focus on the words go and the word stop. But just try to really model their use. And as we move up in the vocabularies, you see how much more we can say. I see that. You like that. Do you see it? I have that. Do you want to have that? Let's go do that. What do you want to do? Where do you want to go? You see, as we, the more symbols we can get on the page, the more we can very quickly model. The general rule is that when we have a communication system like this that we're modeling for our kids, we're trying to model at least one level above where they're currently at. So if we have a student who's not using symbols at all, we're just introducing them to AAC for the first time, we might just model one or two word keyword messages, such as go and like. If the student has already started using a single symbol, maybe they're saying stop, maybe they're saying want, maybe they're going to their food folder or their places folder or their people's folder, then we'll start modeling 2 and 3 symbol messages, such as you want to go, and we might model just you and go, or oh, I like that too, and we'll model I like on their communication page. Once they start putting 2 symbols together, we're going to start modeling longer sentences and so on until we can model kind of proper sentences. Core words are the words we use all across the day, everywhere we go, and just about every activity we do. And if you haven't discovered the Practical AAC website and the work of Carol Zangari yet, then you're going to want to Google this and look it up. Something she's done that's just brilliant is sort of once a month she makes a new list of core words, kind of suggests all the sentences you can make with that set of core words, and makes a symbol display that even if you don't have a communication system yet for your child, you can print it out, you can try to model those core words, you can cut out and laminate those symbols and try to put them up on a larger symbol display, rearrange them, and so on. So this is, for example, what last month's core words looked like in BoardMaker PCS symbols as well as in symbol sticks. So for example, let's say your child has an app like Proloquo or TouchChat, they're probably using symbol sticks. So you might look to this for your ideas of the core words that you're going to model. And if your child has a pod book or is using a Dynavox-based system or the Compass app, then this the Board Maker symbol page will just give you some suggestions. Practical AAC, Kate Ahern, she's also produced, these are sort of, this is what we call an aided language display. So you can see that we've arranged core words, not just as sort of a theme for the month, but we've got them arranged in an activity display that we can use all across the day. If you don't have any form of communication system for a child in a classroom yet or at home, you can print this out, laminate it, have it taped down on the dining room table, on the child's desk, on the wall of the classroom. You can project it for the whole class to see. But you see all these core words that we can use and start modeling all across the day. So when a student turns her head away and doesn't want to do the work anymore, we say, oh, you want to do something different. And we touch the symbol for different. I think you're asking to do something different. Oh, you like that. You want to do that some more. I think you're all done. Oh, you're smiling. You're laughing. You think that's good. Oh, you're frowning. You're pushing that away. You think this is bad. Stuff like that. As we're developing these symbol displays, we fortunately do not have to figure out what words should be on them all by ourselves. Other people have already studied this and thought of it for us. So Gail Van Tatenhove, for example, if you look her up, on the web, she has put together the most common pronouns, verbs, time words such as days of the week and months, seasons, adverbs, adjectives, prepositions. So we can look to this for examples of the kinds of words to model. So we'll start with the most high-frequency pronouns such as I, you, me. I find our kids with Angelman tend to be very social, so we need to introduce words like he and him and she and her very quick because, they're constantly, many of our kids are constantly looking to see what she is doing and what he is doing. And, maybe the child with Angelman wants, to eat what she has. And so they tend to be highly motivated by those, and we can make sure we're really emphasizing the pronouns that let them start asking questions and commenting on the actions of the people around them. So obviously this is a lot of words that we would try to use, but we can start breaking it down to be very doable. But we can look to resources like those of Gail Van Tatenhove to think of how can we start organizing symbols to use with our kids. The Dynamic Learning Maps is an alternative assessment consortium led by the University of North Carolina's Center for Literacy and Disability Studies. And what they did was they took all the kinds of lists like what we just saw from Gail, and came up with what are the core words that allow a student to best participate in class, access the curriculum, and also be part of social communication. So this is their sort of first 40 core words. You'll notice that, for example, the word different is one of the words that they suggest should be in the top 40 words that we need to make sure every child has access to. Different is not really a high-frequency word, so it doesn't show up on those really high-frequency word lists. But if a student has access to the word different, then we can talk about all kinds of things that happen in the classroom. So, for example, we can notice that circles and squares are different, that a sarcophagus might go in a tomb. So you see in's one of the words, but it's different from a mummy, right? We can start having conversations about concept knowledge like that. So just another great resource. Whatever system your child has, we know it's a robust system if we're seeing words like this on it that you can model. Obviously, if we're seeing words like this. If they've got a pod book, if they've got a core vocabulary and proloquo, then we know they've got a robust system. We know it's a system that's robust if we can use it to talk to them. So this is just another example of what a core word page, just a standard core word page, looks like in Proloquo. And you'll see that they used the same research that the dynamic learning maps used to make sure that our kids have access to kind of those keywords. And what I'm going to do is just show you some more of this and show you how we can start using them in writing activities in the classroom. What I wanted to show here is many of our kids are still learning how to use a pointer finger, isolate their finger, and indicate symbols. So I just wanted to show a few different ways that we can set up their symbol displays to be more accessible. For some of our kids, they do a great job pointing, but their accuracy in their pointer just isn't all that great yet. And so if we customize their system so there's just more space between symbols, then that alone can help kids. Whereas if all the symbols are really close to each other and touching, sometimes they accidentally touch the symbol next to the one they want, and it's just less clear which one they're indicating. You don't have to use the color coding. It's probably best not to, but some of our kids really do better visually if they have that color coding, because they know that the word they're looking for isn't a pink word because it's a verb, or it's an orange word because it's a pronoun. I personally find when I'm modeling to Maggie that the color coding just helps me find symbols. We can separate the symbols even further, right? So many of our kids can see things very small, can touch things very small. We see them on their iPads touching these tiny little buttons to make things happen. And if we just separate their symbols further away from each other, they can better access it. Sometimes what we do is we know that we want to move a child to using a system with more symbols like this, but at the moment they just don't have the fine motor skills to do it, so we might hide a large number of the symbols. In this screenshot, what we've done is just hidden half of the symbols in sort of a checkerboard pattern. The other symbols will still be there. So what we're trying to do at this point is make a system that's more physically accessible, but where the child can learn the motor plan, like for example, of where the word me is, with fewer symbols on the page, so there's kind of less chance of being visually overwhelmed by the total number of symbols, a little easier maybe to distinguish the symbols from each other. And what we'll do is slowly over time, we'll uncover the symbols. This is really similar to, imagine if you're just typing on your keyboard, and if we think that you're not ready yet for a full keyboard, we might give you just sort of 5 high-frequency letters, and you're going to learn how to type with maybe just your vowels. You can see that that doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. If we decide you're now ready for 10 letters on a keyboard, 15 letters on a keyboard, every time we add more letters to your keyboard, you have to learn a new motor plan for how you're going to access those letters. So imagine if every time you sat down to type on your keyboard and the letters had been rearranged because we'd added more, that would just make it extremely difficult to use your keyboard. All we're trying to do is play with ways that allow kids to memorize, to motor memorize where their symbols are without them getting mixed up as we add more. So for example, that dynamic learning map showed us 40 words that they feel if every kid only has 40 words, here's the 40 most essential ones to be able to communicate in the classroom. If we feel that our child can only use 20 symbols, can only visually handle 20 symbols on a page right now, we might still make a 40 symbol display and hide 20 of them if that's what we need to do. And there's a whole bunch of ways that we can do that. But you'll just notice that there's many apps out there, there's many systems we can use, but we just want to think about how to make those symbols accessible. This might seem overwhelming. I know people often feel overwhelmed when we say you need to model a child's communication system. I know a whole bunch of school teams and parents have heard this is what we're supposed to do, but really struggle to implement it. I'm going to give some ideas about how to implement it. But we know from the research that it doesn't actually take an extensive amount of training for parents or, for example, school educational assistants to learn how to do this, particularly as kind of keyword modeling of these high-frequency words. So if we just develop a training system, if we just spend a few hours really showing people how to find vocabulary, then they tend to be able to implement this as an intervention quite easily. And I personally find that peers are amazing at this. So classmates are often some of your best modelers. Jennifer Martin from AssistivWare has sort of these do's and don'ts. So her do, use the device to reproduce some of the words from your own speech. So if you're telling a student, oh, you're working so hard, I really like that, you know, you might just, in the very beginning, you might just model like, and I like that, and you, and work, maybe just a few words like that. So you're going to reproduce some of the key words that you're saying. You're going to speak in a grammatically correct order, but you're not necessarily going to try to say that whole sentence on the child's device. So we're still modeling proper sentence structure, but we might, as we speak, but as we're using symbols, we might just look for a few important words. But what we want to do is make sure that we're not just using nouns, because that tends to be the easiest for us to fall back in. So we might offer a student, do you want cheese or do you want noodles? Do you want books or do you want blocks? And we often tend to just give kids access to nouns. Maybe they have pictures or symbols of actual objects in their environment. When we're modeling with aided language stimulation, we're just going to make sure that we are modeling verbs and adjectives like, you know, pretty, beautiful, great, awesome. Prepositions like up, down, off, put it in, take it out, such as that as we're talking to them. We're going to make sure that we show them that their device can be used for a whole variety of purposes. They can use the words in their communication system to request things, but they can also use it to reject things, such as saying, you know, no and stop. When we ask them to work and they say, I'm finished, they can use their device to comment. So we can use their device to comment to them and just provide that model of saying, that's cool, I like that. Thank you, excuse me, when we need to interrupt our child, we can use their system to use those kind of messages. Jennifer mentioned something here on this slide about being telegraphic. Something that I find very, very useful with our kids with Angelman is to use their device to echo back what we see them already saying with their bodies. So when they appear delighted, we use their device to say, you like that. When they appear frustrated, we say, I think you feel. Let's look in feelings. You have a feelings folder. Here it is, frustrated. You are frustrated. And we're modeling back to them what it is we think that they're saying. We're sort of echoing it back. One of the mistakes we made with Maggie when we first introduced it is, you know, we were trying to model, we were trying to use it as often as possible, and I didn't realize the extent to which we were using her system to boss her around. So it is time to go to French, it's time to go to math, it's time to go to the washroom, it's time to get dressed. And I think what she accidentally was learning was that communication systems are used to boss her around, and she wasn't really learning that a communication system can be her voice. What we don't want to do is use the child's communication system to test, and I think this is probably the most common mistake that we make. So for example, let's say the class is reading a book and we're going to describe the character. We might open up our describing words, our positive describing words, and we're going to model, I think the character was funny. I think the character was scared. What do you think? And ask them to look at their symbols and communicate back. When we ask our kids yes/no questions, when we only put it to them to show me this character, when we ask them to use their device to only tell us information we already know, then I think we really, really run the risk of teaching them that the device is not for them to communicate, because communication is when I tell you an idea that you didn't already know I had. Testing is when I tell you the correct answer that you're hoping I can produce. Those are two very different things. And there's a number of ways we can assess our kids, but I think we should be very cautious about using their communication system as a testing tool, or we run the risk of teaching them that it's work. Their communication system is something they only use at school when they're being tested, and it's not something that helps them express all of their own ideas. We should not be asking the student to copy us, where I'm going to say something and now you have to say it too, because again, that's not communication. It's not communication if I take a child's hand and hand over hand ask for something. Because I can't get inside that child's head, I don't know for sure what that child actually wants. So if I take her hand and hand over hand make her say something, I really run the risk of actually saying something that's not true. But I can model for her. I can say, I think you want that, and I can model you want that, or you want this, or you want, I'm going to go to foods and find yogurt. You want yogurt. I can model it, but we really want to make sure we're not asking kids to just copy us and that we're not making them say something. And what we're really looking to do is use Think-Alouds. Fringe vocabulary are those words that are not core words, those words that are not really common. So for example, I like to are all high frequency core words, but run is kind of a fringe word because I might use the words I like and to all across the day, but run might be a word I only use a few times, or even just a few times a week, that kind of thing. What I'll do when I'm using a communication system to talk to Maggie is do a think aloud of where I would find the word. I like to run. That's an action. I'm going to look in your action folder. And what we're doing is modeling how to use the categories that are in their system. What we know is that if we learn to do this, if we can do this with our kids, if we look at kids with a similarly severe level of communication impairment and what happens when we provide them this kind of model, we see significant gains in how children learn to use a communication system. We also see significant gains in their receptive understanding of what others are saying around them. We see kids both learning many more visual symbols and using many more visual symbols. Most children who have several months of, or even a year of this kind of modeling on a communication system learn how to generate multi-word messages, meaning they can put together multiple symbols. We know that when we do this kind of intervention and we're modeling a communication system, we see increased participation all across the school day and a whole bunch of different classroom activities. We know that this modeling intervention is equally effective regardless of the age of the student, and it's equally effective or even more effective with adults as it is with very young children. And what's really interesting to me, what really got my attention about in the research on aided language input, is that we see the gains persist long term. So Romsky and Sevcik are two of the researchers listed below who have just documented the findings I'm listing here on this page. In both 5- and 10-year follow-up studies, they found that if the intervention was done for 1 year when the child was 5 years old, we can go back and assess that child at age 10 and at age 15, and they have kept all of that language development. They have kept that symbol use that they developed then. And in fact, they have a much higher level of symbol use than controls than other students who had the same level of ability at age 5 but who did not receive this kind of modeling. And this is really significant because we know all of the research on speech therapy shows us that we can teach kids to use certain words in speech therapy. We can teach them to use certain words through direct instruction to show us this and do that, but they often don't keep it. We don't see them generalizing it to other contexts. Just as children will learn vocabulary as you study Pioneer Society or butterflies or ancient Egypt, kids learn words at school that a year later, 2 years later, even 6 months later, they've already forgotten. Much of what we do with sort of direct instruction approaches to teach kids words they don't hold on to, but when they've learned it through aided language input, they've really developed language, and we see them keep the skills long term. Romsky and Sevcik also described sort of the 6 myths about AAC use. There's often an idea that AAC using a communication system is the last resort. We should first try to develop speech, we should first try to develop manual signs, and we'll just use a symbol system if we have to. We know that that's just not true. The research shows us that if we, from as young as possible, start using symbol systems with kids, they're actually more likely to speak more words with oral language, and they're more likely to develop more manual signs. So using AAC to augment speech actually encourages more speech. It only speeds speech development. There is no level of prerequisite skills. Kids don't have to be able to point their finger or demonstrate understanding of any words or be a certain age before they can benefit from aided language input. And we also know that the research is showing us that while we once believed there was really this what's called a representational hierarchy, that kids first learn that there's such a thing as symbols or as objects, and then they can learn to match a part of an object to a whole object, and then they can learn to match a photograph to part of an object or to an object, and then they can learn a symbol, that there was this idea that there was this hierarchy. The kids had to go through this stage before they could use symbols. We now know that it's much more fluid than that. And even as children are learning about really tangible objects, we can use symbols to talk with them about those objects, and they can learn those symbols. So those are sort of the myths about AAC that we need to debunk so that we can start using this in classrooms. And the reality is that, you know, most of our kids have learned this symbol. Therefore, we know that they can learn others. We know that if we can make symbols as visible in their environment as this symbol tends to be, and if we can make symbol use as personally rewarding and satisfying as this symbol tends to be, then we can get them using other symbols. And, you know, for my kids, this symbol, this probably tells you a lot about us, but this is the symbol they learned before they learned the other. In the classroom, we can use aided language input all across the day in so many different ways. So the first thing I do is invite other kids to use the child's communication system, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. We can show paraprofessionals how to use it, and really what we're trying to do with our educational assistants is show them how to model using the child's system to really echo and reinforce what the teacher is already saying. We want to use the child's communication system to help direct the child's attention to the teacher. If the assignment is to sit down at our desk and we're going to describe something from a book that we just read, then the paraprofessional can support the child with their communication system to open their describing words, to open their adjective folder, however their system is organized, and look for words that are appropriate for that context. If we're playing with blocks or playing with trucks, then we'll use the child system to use words like in and out and go fast and truck and up and down. If the child is wearing their system, or if we have a spare system, it's really important that they have it available in the hallway. I mean, I think that anyone who's worked with a child with Angelman will have noticed that even just walking up and down the hallway, they are greeted and are trying to greet people on a very regular basis. And many of our kids kind of struggle to process that greeting or struggle to go anywhere with that greeting. So people tend to go up to them and say, oh, you know, hi, Maggie. And our kids are often sort of delayed in that ability to quickly respond and maybe find the word on their system and greet them back. If we can just stop folks when they greet them and hold out the child's communication system and say, here, say hi to Maggie using her voice. Ask Maggie how she is using her voice. Here's her talk. Can you, say what you want to say to her using this? Then it really slows people down. It gets them to stop a moment. They turn their attention to the device. They're looking for how they can greet the child that way. And it gives our kids time to better process who's right there and what it is they might be able to say to them. So most of the time, I really encourage school teams to have two systems. So maybe the family's provided an iPad with the app that they're using for communication, and if the school also provides an iPad with that same app, then the child can have one, can wear one, can carry one, and that's just available for them, and then we have a second one so that others can model back. But we really need to get the whole school community to help support it. So carrying the iPad around on the playground, everywhere else. Peers can learn so much empathy from learning how to use our children's communication systems. In Maggie's class, we have something called the AAC User of the Day. So every day in class, a different student gets to wear her same system, her iPad with her Proloquo, and try to talk with it. What they quickly learn is that they thought that it was this really easy thing where you just use cartoons to talk to for you, and what you instead discover is it's really difficult. You really have to, it's a completely different way of communicating. You really have to reorganize your brain and reorganize the message that you want to say. And we can require that when peers use our child system, they have to keep a list of the things they wanted to say. Maybe they have to journal on how they felt when they couldn't say things quickly enough or couldn't express the ideas that they wanted to express. These are all just ways to really develop understanding and empathy in the classroom by using peers. Maggie's in a grade 6 classroom, and I know when I first suggested this, having an AAC User of the Day, they were very cautious and agreed to do it for about an hour a day. And there was a lot of concern that the kids would get carried away, but it actually has worked quite well. And the kids consider it a privilege. They've taken it very seriously, and they've had no problem actually using an iPad to talk for the full day. We can create what we call a communication circle, and that would really be its own webinar, but it's just essentially creating a hub. If our child with Angelman is the hub, then kind of a wheel around them of people students who have also learned the child's communication system enough to help facilitate interaction with the other kids. So just as we have what's called circles of friends, we can make it more targeted and have a communication circle and have a small group of students who take turns learning how to say more with the child system so that they can help facilitate. We can use the child system to summarize what we're studying in the curriculum. So I'll give you some examples of that in a minute, but as we introduce new concepts, I remember when they were introducing the concept of ancient Egypt and mummies with Maggie, we had to look at her core words and go, how could we summarize what a mummy is? And you'll see in a moment what how one of the students summarized it, but I think it was old, dead, and nasty was the word she found in her Proloquo to describe and summarize what she was studying in the curriculum. And when we do that, when we have peers help try to summarize and describe the curriculum to our kids, you'll see that they have a deeper level of cognitive engagement with what they're studying. You know, Maggie's friend who summarized mummies as old, dead, and nasty really had to think about it, had to go through the vocabulary, etc. So especially those kids who aren't already highly engaged, who aren't already really high achieving, this is just kind of a new way of getting them more hooked, because many of those kids who are just sort of disengaged and just aren't highly focused actually find using the electronics quite entertaining. If we've got students who aren't very descriptive writers and they just write very boring text and they just don't know how to kind of put those much more fun sparkle words in their writing, then we can tell them, hey, open up Maggie's Proloquo, look at her describing words, see if you can find some adjectives to add to your writing, and just provide more pizzazz. And we can use the child's communication system to make books, and that's what we're going to look at in just a minute. Gail Van Tatenhove has developed what she calls the Descriptive Teaching Method, where she's trying to address how so often when a student is being included in a regular classroom, we're constantly trying to add new words to their device so that they can talk about those curriculum words. And what happens is we spend so much time trying to introduce new words that we might not really be teaching them how to use the words they have. What we want to do instead is teach them how to describe those curriculum words using these same high-frequency words that we've already looked at. So, for example, here she's taken a unit on the nature of matter. Students are going to have to study matter to be able to describe its observable properties, such as colors and shapes. Well, what she's done here is the words in pink are the words that are just specific to this vocabulary, this subject area. So words like observable properties, form, texture, solid, liquid, gas, melt, evaporate. Those are all words that we're going to use a lot in this one unit as we study the nature of matter, but they're not words that are already in the student's communication system. So let's look at the words that already are. Well, the student already they have a whole folder of color words. They have a whole folder of shape words. They've already got some good describing words like straight and rough and hard and soft and big, little, heavy, light, thin, long, short. So when we really look at the words they've already got access to a whole bunch of words that can be used to describe matter. For studying ancient Egypt, so we can just take a look at the child's system. So what's a canopic chart? It's something we put body parts in. Those were all words that were easy to find in Proloquo. What's a pyramid? This is what one of the students in our class wrote. Using her Proloquo, she was able to describe a pyramid as something people build, big-shaped triangle. Not a terribly precise description, but we can all get the sense of what's a tomb, something we put dead people in. All right. I was in a class and they were studying the American Revolution and trying to figure out how the student with Angelman could use the words protest and boycott and taxation without representation. What we did was they actually wrote a book of I protest when I say no. I protest when I say I do not like that. I protest when I say stop. I boycott when I say no. I boycott when I do not buy that. What is taxation? When it's taking too much. We don't like, not fair. What is representation? To speak for all, to choose who speaks. These are all just uses of core words that can describe these big concepts. And you can imagine, I think this was a 5th grade class. In a 5th grade class, it's actually really useful for all those gen ed kids to have to sit down and think about what is it to protest and how would I describe protest in very everyday, plain language, such as what you'll see in a communication system. For this assignment, the kids were reading a book out loud, so it's a chapter book that the teacher's reading, and this was what you'll see on the left is the assignment that what the kids had to do in response to the book. And the adaptation for Maggie was that the paraprofessional would read back certain paragraphs that the teacher had selected. So I think the teacher selected 3 paragraphs that she felt really sort of demonstrated the big ideas of the chapter, and then asked Maggie to use her feelings page to describe the feelings of the character in that section. So this was just how Maggie could participate in what the whole class was doing, using her communication system to respond. You'll see that there's not right or wrong answers. So I don't know exactly what the first paragraph was that they read, but basically everything was going very well. The character was expecting to be able to go on this expedition to climb Mount Everest and was quite excited. And Maggie chose all very positive words of curious, relaxed, good to describe the character. What we can tell from that is that she gets the big idea. We can tell in the second section, you'll see she chose the words relaxed, homesick, not really come. And if you know the context of what she's responding to, you can see it's totally random. It makes no sense. For whatever reason, Maggie was not able to sort of respond to that section the way that, in a way that would show us that she really understood it. But then in the third one, she chooses words like thankful, good, awake, and happy, and that completely makes sense given the context. The main character in the book had thought he was climbing Mount Everest and then thought he wasn't and was very upset, and now discovers he's going to be able to. So we often write alphabet books, and I had this in here for a reason, don't remember why, but we often do alphabet books specific to the curriculum and specific to the kids in class. I'm going to skip through these really quick because we covered some of these yesterday and I'm already so far behind, and we're just going to talk about predictable chart writing and writing using the student's communication system. So you'll remember at the beginning of the webinar we looked at how listening and speaking and reading and writing are also interrelated. There's so much we can do to support our kids' communication by supporting their writing. And in fact, Janet Sturm's research really shows us that when kids are learning how to use a communication system, that cognitive process of having to have an idea in their head and then translate it into symbols on a communication device and find those symbols is cognitively the same process that a beginning writer goes through when they're thinking about what it is they want to say, but they only know how to form so many letters, only know how to spell so many words. So some of the things that we'll do with our kids is activities such as predictable chart writing. We're going to use the student's communication system in reading and writing, and I'll actually cover that in more detail now. Predictable chart writing is a general education strategy that we use in kindergarten and first grade. It's what Patricia Cunningham calls a structured language experience by having children actually dictate sentences using a structure that the teacher has selected. The kids are dictating a sentence about something they know about, and they learn how to read their own dictation. So for example, the sentence structure might be I like, or I like to eat, and the kids all get to finish that sentence with something like I like to eat blueberries, I like to eat candy, and even a child who has very limited language skills and cannot yet read can actually read their own sentence because they helped dictate it. We know that this process of predictable chart writing is ideal for English language learners to help them learn sentence structure. Many of our kids are in schools where there's English language learner ELL instruction occurring. This is a great activity to include our kids in. This is a great activity to do in those ELL instructional sessions. It's especially ideal for our kids who are learning to use a communication system because what you'll find is that if a group of students and the teacher and the educational assistant use the child's system to complete these sentences, it's a really nice structured way for everyone to learn how to find vocabulary. And it uses all the same high-frequency words that kids are just learning how to read and write and say on a communication system. In an inclusive classroom, as the kids are getting older, maybe into grades 3, 4, 5, and up, we would probably do predictable chart writing in a small group. It's not something we would expect to do with the whole class. We would likely involve any students in class who are English language learners or who are just struggling with reading or writing or maybe just particularly disengaged and not motivated by it, and 1 or 2 students who are strong role models. So we're just trying to gather a small group of students who are going to do this activity. And what's going to be challenging about it for them, even though the sentence structure might be very simple for them, such as I like to eat. That would obviously be a very simple thing for a grade 4, 5, 6 student to do. By having to use our student's communication system, by having to use the same system the student with Angelman is learning, it actually becomes much more challenging for all the kids, and they tend to stay quite engaged. What I recommend is that the teacher take the student's core words. So think of that symbol display where we had words like I and you and like, get, want, go, stop, and we take those words to develop the sentence frame. I'll give you a bunch of examples of that next. We're going to have all the participants use the student's communication system. So when we're doing predictable chart writing in the inclusive classroom for our kids, to benefit our kids with Angelman, we're making sure that everyone has to use our students' AAC, our students' communication system, to develop the sentences that we do in predictable chart writing. We're going to use think-aloud strategies like I think he is could be our sentence structure. It might just be a group of girls and they all get to describe the boys in the class. I think he is. He is what? I'm going to look into my describing words and see if I can find a word. There it is. Awesome. I think he is awesome. We can video record the entire message construction so that as each student constructs a message such as I think he is awesome, we can video record that so that our student with Angelman can watch that as a video model afterwards. And we're going to reconstruct the sentences. You'll see some examples. On the first day, the teacher creates a sentence structure such as "I like to eat," and the students dictate how they're going to finish that sentence. So if it's "I like to eat blueberries," then that might be their sentence. All the students go around and construct that sentence on our students' communication system. So what you'll see is something like "I like to eat food folder blueberries." In traditional predictable chart writing, there's activities that we do each day of the week. So we're working with the same sentence frame over the whole course of the week. What we're usually doing in an inclusive context is we might just dictate the sentences with, say, a small group of 6 or 7 students on the first day. And over the course of the week, we might do things just in groups with just 1 other student or 2 other students. It just completely depends on the makeup of the classroom. But what I'm always looking for is I don't want this to be too easy or too boring for the kids who are part of it. Some of the things that we do over the course of the week are a choral reading of the sentences, just meaning that as a group we're going to read the sentences together. Remember that these sentences were constructed on the child's communication system, so we can show them how they can read along because all the same sentences are right there. We can create a video model of the sentences as they're being read, and I've got the app explain everything. I'll show you how that works to read those sentences. We can pass an iPad around, have the kids construct their message. We can video record that, and they can record themselves saying it. We do lots of sentence building activities, which will be very familiar to all the teachers out there, and then we glue down the sentences onto chart paper, construction paper, cardstock. We illustrate the pages. We can cut out photos. You'll see lots of examples. We can draw on the pages. We can laminate the book or not. Just depends on the student. We attach it, and now we've got a really simple book. And what we end up with are these books that our child with Angelman, our student with Angelman, has helped to write. Their own communication system was used to write the book. They can actually participate in reading the book, and we can model how they can read the book using their AAC. And it just really integrates how we're working on reading, writing, and communication in the classroom. Over the course of the week, over the course of a month, over the course of the school year, we can encourage other students to add to the book. So maybe early in the year we wrote a book called "I Like To," and the kids chose different activities. So maybe a group of 6 students chose different things to finish. I liked to go to the mall. I like to shop. I like to run. I like to swim. Over the course of the year, as there's downtime in the classroom, as maybe new students come in, we can invite students to keep adding to the book. The book can get bigger and bigger. We can make a second "I Like To" book. But it's a really nice activity to do when you have that few minutes of downtime just here and there with someone, with a student who wants to do an activity with our student with Angelman. Let's take a look at their predictable chart writing books and let's add a page. But don't forget, we're going to use their communication system to write it. Our students' homework for the week can be to go home and have the family participate over the course of the week in adding more pages to the book. So now if the sentence that we've chosen is "I like to," then the family will pass the child's communication system around at home. They'll each make a page of "I like to," and we'll add those pages to the book. We'll read the book with the student during shared reading. We'll ask classmates if they want to read the book with our student with Angelman, read the book with them and consider reading it with them using their communication system. So they're, again, reconstructing those messages. We can ask our student with Angelman if they're really into it and they're highly skilled, then they can read the book themselves using their AAC. We know all the words are in their system because we use that system to write it. We can ask them just to read specific words using the AAC. So for example, if the book is an "I like to" book, and we might say to our student with Angelman, you read the book like. Wherever you see "like," you're going to read that using your proloquo. And see if the student is beginning to recognize the word "like" and can find it on their page. We can say to the student with Angelman, you touch the words on the page, you read this with the voice in your head while I read the words out loud. So here's what predictable chart writing can look like. So here's where we've just made a list of sentences that we've all finished. This was some predictable chart writing we did at camp, so we were doing things like canoeing and swimming. Here's an example of predictable chart writing before going to the zoo. So we're each saying the animal we want to see. And this is a video of how we can make really easy video models of how we said this. To make these sentences, we just said, I want to see. Those were all core words on the home page. And then we had to go, I want to see animals. Let's go to the animal folder and then find the animal we want. So we did a think aloud as we did it. So what's really lovely about the app Explain Everything, besides the fact that it's only $3, is that we can use a laser pointer to read things aloud. We capture that recording while drawing our kids' attention to print. You'll notice in predictable chart writing, we've put the name of the person who constructed each sentence at the end of it. And what we're going to expect is that our student with Angelman will very likely, the first word they might memorize as part of the process of learning predictable chart writing is names. That tends to be one of the first words they learn. I would also not be surprised if one of the first words they learn is the word I, because look at the high frequency with which it appears and how distinct the word I is from the rest of them. So here's some pages from predictable chart writing books. So these sentences would have been listed out, would have been cut and pasted, would have been glued down to the page, and then the kids illustrated their pictures. I like to work. Obviously, they got a little carried away with their illustrations. I like to laugh. I like to help. I like to fly. These are really highly motivating books for so many of our kids to read after the fact. So here's the sentence frame, I need to. They would have then moved on to actions to find the words that they need to finish the sentence. Not quite sure how that one came about. We can make the books, we can illustrate the books using the kids' own symbols as the illustration for the page. So in this case, we were working on symbol recognition. We're not going to pair symbols with specific words because we really want our kids to be learning how to read, but we can use the symbols to help them read the page. So here's this repeated sentence frame of I see and then we're using the symbol as the visual support to be able to read that last word. This is some predictable chart writing that a really lovely family in California did. So obviously the phrase, the predictable chart writing sentence frame is I love. And they're completing it with pictures of themselves doing all kinds of fun activities. So the sentence frame I play, here's all the different things we play. What's really lovely about this is that it's highly personal. Through the process of predictable chart writing, we're creating highly personalized texts that our kids helped write, helped generate, that they can actually read on their communication system. Here's their A Bunny Can book. So you can see all the ways that we can apply this to topics in the classroom. If we've learned about pyramids, if we've learned about pilgrims, if we've learned about butterflies and caterpillars, we can do predictable chart writing to deepen that. I like to use apps like Click or Connect to actually start doing some assessment to see if our kids are learning the words. So maybe we're reading the book I like to, and we can use an app like Click or Connect to create closed maze sentences where for certain words we've decided to give multiple options and see if our student can correctly find the right word. So maybe I read the page, I like to sleep. We know Maisie wrote that sentence, we've read it, we remembered that Maisie wrote it, now we close the book and put it away and see if, okay Maggie, now which one did Maisie say again? I like to, and see if she can recognize the word and correctly type the sentence. We can encourage her to read her own page out loud. So Maggie's sentence up there had been, I like to draw. She can actually read that page herself using her proloquo. We can add more pages over time. I find that the more kids explore, the more that they make pages such as this one. I want to. Once left to their own devices, they'll come up with all kinds of creative vocabulary, and they'll add more pages to the book. These are just really common high-frequency words such as am, I need, I can, I will. These are kind of the easiest sentence frames to make from most communication system homepages. So what I did was then I just took these really high-frequency sentence frames such as I am and said, where would we find the vocabulary to finish this? So I am what? Well, I am in a category-based system such as Proloquo. I'd probably go to my people folder and then look under friends, families, jobs to be able to finish that. So maybe it's a social role like I am a daughter. Maybe it's I am, and we're going to go to the feelings page. I am happy, I am excited, I am tired, I am sleepy. Maybe it's I am, and I'm going to look in my describing words. I am blue, I am purple, I am pink. I am big, I am small, I am smelly. There's all kinds of words we can find in our describing words to make really entertaining books. I am, we'll look in verbs. I am running, I am sitting, I am jumping. I need. I can look in my fun folder for, you know, I need to play. I can look in my actions. I need to run. I need to swim. I can look in my things folder for I need an iPad. I can. Well, I can go and I can look in my places folder to finish that. I can go to Disneyland. I can go to McDonald's. I can go to the store. I can go on a walk. I can actions. I can walk. I can run. I can ride a bike. I can eat. I can eat blueberries. I can eat chicken. I can eat delicious food. I can eat junk food. I can imagine. I can dream. I can think. I can smell, etc. I will. We might look in action words. I run, I will run, I will imagine, I will dream. I will go to Disneyland. I will go on a walk. I will be a sister. I will be a police officer. I will be a princess. I will see, I can look in my things folder. I will, if I'm going to the zoo, I will see penguins. If I'm going on a walk in the woods, I will see trees. If I'm going on a walk downtown, I will see trucks, etc. I see. So I see places, can be locations. I see a store. I see a car. I see whatever's around me in the classroom. I'll try to find that on my page. After we've gone on an outing, we can say, I saw, and do a predictable chart writing book like that. So before an outing, we might make predictions about what I hope to see or what I want to see. During the outing, we can model using the child system. Oh, look, I see this, I see that. And then after the outing, we can write a book, check our predictions, and say what we actually saw. I like to. So that's all predictable chart writing. A curriculum to think about if you want a more structured approach to this is the Start to Finish Literacy Starters with Don Johnston. We talked about it yesterday. Predictable chart writing just works so beautifully with this system because you've already got these leveled readers that come with it, and then you'll notice here that you have this making words book as part of the system. So it's this sort of brownish gold book. It says Making Words for Students with Complex Instructional Needs. And it's all about sight word instruction. It's all about making words with really letter by letter word exploration. You'll have word wall words that you're going to be trying to use frequently. It's all those same high frequency core words. And so from lessons 1 through 10, you might be using words like am and as and at. And so you're just going to use those words in your predictable chart writing. Systematic sequential phonics is the general education version of that Making Words book, whereas the one I just showed you here, Making Words for Students with Complex Instructional Needs, is sort of the adapted version for students with significant disabilities. But all of it is just really good word studies. So we're not only using the student's communication system to construct words, to start recognizing words, to learn sight words, but we're also actually teaching them how words work, doing that letter by letter exploration. We're making words. we're developing word-wall words. We're making sure we use these words in our predictable chart writing. And we're actually testing if our kids are starting to learn how to read some of these words and can spell some of these words in their writing. I'm just about to finish up here. One of the things that we do is, as part of that lesson, as part of that making words, as part of systematic sequential phonics, or the adapted version from Don Johnston, we really encourage the peers in the inclusive classroom to make these kind of word videos for kids. This is using a chant developed by Carolyn Musselwhite, where she's drawing on all the different cognitive processors that kids learn to use words. So I'll just play that real quick. If it plays. So that's just a really simple little word video. We use the app Explain Everything, that little $3 app. Any kid in the class can make this kind of word video. We've done it for, we'll put in a word and have kids show, here's the root word, here's the prefix, here's the suffix. Use the word in a sentence, spell it, etc. It's a very simple screencasting app. I find kids can learn in about 5 minutes. And lastly, we're going to just do as much writing as we can just for self-expression. So throughout the course of all this, if we learn predictable chart writing, we're really systematically figuring out how to use the child's communication system to express lots of sort of common phrases to use. And then where this really gets fun, sort of the cupcake on top, or the icing on top, is to be making sure that we're writing with our kids using their AAC for self-expression. And what tends to work best with our kids with Angelman is to first choose an audience. Who are you going to write to? It might be a classmate, it might be a family member, it might be a friend or another favorite person. In my daughter Maggie's case, it might be Harry Styles from the band One Direction. Next, we're going to choose a purpose for the message. So what kind of message do you want to express? A really fun phrase to start with is, I like you because. You are. I like you because you are. So again, these are phrases that we can use their communication system to say, and then we just leave it up to the student to figure out how they want to finish it. We might model different things they could say. We might go to our positive describing words folder. And well, I think that Maisie is beautiful and funny and smart. What about you? What do you want to say to this? We can find a photo of the student or some other visual support to support our students' writing, and then just get them to try to finish these sentence frames and be able to actually deliver a message to someone in their class or to whoever it is that they wrote this message to. I didn't talk much about scribbling in this webinar, but scribbling just means giving kids access to the whole alphabet to do their writing. We want to do that as much as possible. For writing for self-expression, what we tend to do is if the student has chosen an audience, such as their classmate Maisie, they've chosen a purpose. I want to write her a note to tell her why I like her. They've used their AAC to give us some indication of what it is why they like her. Maybe they've chosen a photo of Maisie or not to add to it. And now we just encourage them to just knock themselves out writing. And if they type a whole bunch of the letter M's, then we say, oh, wow, I wonder if all these M's are for Maisie. Or I wonder if the M's are for marvelous, or let's look in your describing words folder and see if we can find any other M words that that maybe you were thinking of. Oh, I see messy was one of your describing words. You weren't calling Maisie messy, were you? And we can have a lot of fun with it, give our kids feedback that way, but just really get them exploring the alphabet. This is very short notice, obviously, but next week there is a conference, 3 days, talking about what I tried to condense into over an hour. There's also a Facebook group called Angelman Literacy and Education. There's about 2,000 parents and teachers, so I know I tried to pack in too much here, but if you want to talk about any of this further, you can find us all on Facebook. And what matters is that we just take the first step. So that's it.
right. Thank you, Erin. All right, we do have a couple questions. One, people are asking if they can have the PowerPoint presentation. So if you can email it to me, we can put it up on our website. I know it takes a while to get to us with all the files in there, but if you can do that whenever you have a chance, then we can get it up there so people can look at those slides.
Sure.
And then, let's see. Here's a couple questions. One person wants to know, what if my teen doesn't respond to symbols or discern symbols, but will use photos, photographic images mainly?
Then again, I would be modeling the use of symbols and pairing them with photos, right? So remember that photos can only represent concrete, real life objects, people, etc. A photo doesn't really let you comment on that person. So if our student really responds to pictures of their favorite people, then we're going to use symbols to say, oh yes, you like that person. She is. Let's look in your describing words. She is beautiful. She is funny. You love that person, right? So what we'll be doing is using those photos that they respond to, but we really need to be layering symbols with it to make more of it than just looking at photos. Otherwise, I mean, our kids can sit there looking at photos for hours, but we don't know what thoughts they're having about the people in their photos, right? Because the photos are just a thing, just a person. We have to add language to those photos to make it more meaningful, and that's what we're going to do with the symbols, is use the symbols to add language to it. And we'll model that. I mean, kids aren't going to naturally figure out that symbols let them comment. We have to use it first, just like with small children, we use words first before they start using them.
Okay. Let's see. Somebody wants to know where you can get access to the programming for the color-coded AAC.
So most of the screenshots I was showing were the app Proloquo Go, and it's just in the settings under color code. If you actually just Google Proloquo Go color code, you'll see what that specific setting is. Pretty much every AAC system follows one of two color coding schemes. I think that Proloquo uses the modified Fitzgerald key, but you'll see there's different systems out there. If you just Google AAC color code, you'll see what the different color schemes are. But most communication systems will either use a color code around just the border of the symbol or as a background as well.
Okay. Do you use AAC to do project approach with peers when exploring new topics?
Absolutely. So remember when we talked about like the descriptive teaching approach of Gail Van Tatenhove. So we might use, I'd probably use something like photos if we have to choose a topic and it's a new topic. So maybe we've got, what I often like to do is create like an alphabet book about a new curriculum topic. So let's say, I don't know, let's say we're studying world government or current events, and so we might make an alphabet book that O is for Obama and etc., right? So we'll put in all the different issues, we'll put in all the different candidates, we'll make an alphabet book, and then use that alphabet book as what we're actually talking about different topics about. So now we need to choose one. Maybe we have a Founding Fathers alphabet book, or for Black History Month we have a Civil Rights Leaders alphabet book. Now we need to choose who we're going to write about. That's where we might use the system, we might use the alphabet book to choose who we're going to write about or who we're going to study, who we're going to research and learn more about. But now we need to start using the AAC system for what we're going to say about them. So how can we describe them? Can we look in our describing words and find words to describe current events? Can we find words to describe Martin Luther King? Right? That's where we start using the communication system.
Okay, and we'll just take a couple more. I do have more that we probably won't be able to get through, but these are all recorded questions, so I can send them to Erin and hopefully send you some answers after the webinar. Let's do one more. This one is for AAC users of the day. Any tips for this for kindergartners? would you suggest starting with an hour or just within a whole activity? And then for
that's a great idea.
Yeah, for Maggie's classmates, are the users of the day only using P2Go that day?
So there's always a spare, I'll start with the second question. There's always a spare iPad in Maggie's classroom for the AAC user of the day. They might take it off and pass it around during small group work. They might take it off so it can be shared around with whoever she's hanging out with at recess, that kind of thing, but there's always that spare system. They rotate through, so I think there's almost 30 kids in her class, so I imagine that somewhere around once a month each kid gets an opportunity to be the AAC user of the day, and I think if they don't want to do it, their name just goes back in the hat kind of thing. There's certain kids who are quite excited about it and are always jumping up and down to do it, and others who are much more reticent. In kindergarten, what I would probably start with is paper-based symbol displays such as, let's see, are my slides still showing?
Yes, now they are.
Okay, let me go back. So a symbol display such as Kate Ahern's, where it's a sort of a generic interactive display that can just be available all over the classroom with words like do and like and want and give, and then we can have activity-specific ones. So I don't have any in this presentation, but if you Google aided language or ALD aided language display or activity-specific display. For example, you can make one specific to block building where we'll have words like blocks and build and on and off and up and down and put, and that might be part of a symbol display in the block corner. And then in the housekeeping corner we might have baby and cook and cry and cuddle and that kind of thing, right? So I think especially in any kind of kindergarten setting, those activity-specific displays are just really helpful. And if you email me, Sheila, I'm happy to have you share my email address, or people just find us in the Facebook group. We can post examples of activity-specific symbol displays that you can just download as a PDF and print out. But it's just great to have those sort of laminated and in all the different stations in the classroom. That tends to make it really easy for kids to explore.
Great. Well, we're going to go ahead and log off. This webinar was recorded, so we will post it on our website and on our YouTube channel if you guys want to view it again or want to send it to your teachers. Erin, thank you again. You always have so much information to share, and we appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do so.
Sure. Thanks so much for listening.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.